Hi, my name is Crystal Fletcher, and welcome to All About Books. If you love books, then you've come to the right place because I interview authors about what inspires them to write theirs. Today, I am delighted to be speaking with Dr. Jocelyn Cullity. Jocelyn teaches in the BFA in the Creative Writing Program at Truman State University in Missouri. She has published short stories, essays, and has an award-winning documentary film. Today, we'll be discussing her novel, The Envy of Paradise, which is a sequel to the award-winning Amah and the Silk-Winged Pigeons. Before we start, Jocelyn, I'll just read the back cover so our viewers will know what we're talking about. In 1858, the British took over the city of Lucknow, paving the way for Queen Victoria's reign over India. But what happened to Begum Hazrat Mahal, the woman of African Indian descent who had valiantly organized a final key resistance to British rule, and to her ex-husband, Wajah Ali Shah, the last king in India who remained imprisoned by the British? The Envy of Paradise tells their stories. So Jocelyn, a warm welcome to All About Books.
Thanks so much for having me, Crystal.
I'm thrilled you're here. So Jocelyn, your family has a really deep connection with India. They lived there for over 5 generations, Delhi, Calcutta, Lucknow. Can you take us back in time and just tell us, what were they doing in India?
Well, they were there from the very beginning in the 1700s when the English first went there as merchants to begin to trade. And then that relationship, changed over the hundreds of years that they were there until they were really a strong colonial power. So my family was a part of that enterprise from the very beginning. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was the first governor of Mumbai, the first salaried governor. And they lived in India all their lives. They would come back to retire, but all my family's passports were Indian, and they spent the majority of their lives in India. Their children would go back for school in England and then go back out to India and get married. So they were there. They were definitely a big part of that. They were civil engineers, a lot of them. So they were working with, construction of roads and bridges and that sort of thing. But anyway, there was a lot of them. So they were doing all sorts of things too.
Okay. And I was really interested, when you were 14, you transcribed your great-great-great-aunt's diary. Now, before we discuss what you found in that diary, I was really intrigued that a young 14-year-old would be interested in transcribing her great-great-great-aunt's diary. Can you tell us how you got interested in that?
Well, I was actually told to do it.
Oh.
Because my mother would go back to England to visit her last of her relatives. So many of the men died in India, and the women would come back as very old ladies to live in this tiny village called Wannersh in England in their 80s and 90s. And my mother would go and visit them, and I would go along as a child and then a teenager. And one day my mother said, we really should copy out this diary because it's a very important diary. And there was no photocopier in the village. So okay. I was told to do it by hand. So of course that gives you a lot of time to consider what it is you're actually, transcribing over to paper. So that's how that happened. And it just really stuck with me because she was held hostage in the residency with a number of other English people when the English were the English had taken over most of India, and Lucknow was one of their last stops. And they experienced a deep resistance to the takeover in
Yes.
Lucknow. And the Indians basically surrounded them, and the English went into this one building called the Residency, 5,000 of them, I believe. That number might not be exactly correct, but around there. And my great aunt wrote the diary while they were held hostage for I think it was 5 months. And so it was fascinating to me because every day they thought they were going to die, because the Indian numbers were far more considerable than 5,000. So they really felt that they weren't going to be able to, hold their own there. But they did. And so it was interesting to me, but I became much more interested in the Indian point of view, because so much has been written from the English point of view. The military histories are still being celebrated. And there was almost nothing when I started to do research that immediately was about the Indian point of view, and really nothing about the Indian woman's point of view, because this was really the event in 19th century England, this sort of imperialist event that it was huge. And so there was so much written about it, but the English points of view take in very little about the Indian point of view. So that started to really irk me, and I was very interested to start to piece together what happened exactly, and who resisted the English. And lo and behold, I found out it was this African, half Indian woman who almost beat the English. And I really wanted to honor her, because she understood at that time what was happening, about, how audacious it was that the English were just trying to take over this whole country at a time when it was really quite normal, and anyway, her voice really spoke to me. She had made these speeches, and after, it took me a long time to do the research, because again, it was piecing together little bits. And so all of that came out of that first diary, basically, and yeah, that diary really inspired me.
It was certainly the spark, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I'd have to say, while reading your novel, Jocelyn, I was absolutely fascinated, and I'm sorry my pronunciation, Begum Hazrat Mahal, fascinated by her, because you think this is in the 18.
Yeah, 1858.
And I was like, how does a woman organize and have the manpower behind her for this resistance? Can you share with everyone how she was able to accomplish this? Because this is an incredible feat, and also incredible that it's not celebrated. Unfortunately, women's stories tend to get brushed.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And, it kind of, I kept thinking, having been to India a lot of times, I find women there extremely strong and very clear-sighted and strong political figures in ways that perhaps we in Canada or the United States don't recognize and don't realize, how strong their voices are. But Begum Hazrat Mahal, she really was lost in history, because the English took over and just eradicated everything. I mean, they burned books, they burned histories. I mean, there was so much that she had written that they burned. This is what happens when somebody wins the war or goes in and takes over a country. I mean, they just really decimate often what has gone before. And hers was a very rich culture that actually respected slaves. And, again, I'm not, trying to make any sort of justification. Yes, they were purchased from East Africa and brought to India. But unlike what happened in the United States, what happened in India was a lot of royal families, for instance, she became a queen, and and she had been, as her father had been, a slave. And so there was this kind of movement, upper or mobility that was available. And so you're right. I mean, she got to the point where she was able to get the word out and really be in charge of an enormous army of people to fight the English. And again, they did really well, but there's no way in the end they could fight the firepower that the English had. And they brought a lot of troops out from England in the end just to really just sort of squash the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, again, there was a lot of Indians who were not happy with what was going on. Mm-hmm. And she was able to organize and coordinate.
Yeah, incredible. And what I also really enjoyed about your book was having the two different narratives. You know, this feisty woman, an incredible woman, and then on the other hand, the king, who was actually incredible in his own way too. Like he seemed to be a very compassionate man, patron of the arts. Mm. But I was wondering, from your perspective, did you see him as being more of a fragile character? Mm-hmm. Was it that he was just so tricked by the British that was the cause of his downfall?
Yeah, he was. I think he was probably an extremely gentle soul. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no doubt, you know, Rosie Llewellyn-Jones, who is the historian that has done an extraordinary amount of primary research, and I'm grateful for everything she's ever written because it really helped me. But you know, she would say that he was conceited too, right? She would say he had his weaknesses for sure. But the English only talked about that in yes. any of their written, essays or whatever they wrote about him. It was always incredibly derogatory, and they saw him as a weak man. And mm-hmm. They saw his kindness as weak. That's how mm-hmm. I felt. And he was kind, and he really sort of welcomed them to Lucknow, and they did trick him, and they did keep him locked up so that they could do what they wanted in Lucknow. And it really was awful what they did to him. And I found him to be I respected and admired him for being able just to go on living after all of that had occurred. And that's what I just try and show in the book, is actually what a strong person he was. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was abused as a child, and that definitely helped yes. to make him fragile. And that's something that, you know, I don't feel has been recognized enough about, you yes. know, how much this caused him harm.
Mm-hmm. And I also really appreciated with him as a man, the way he celebrated all the different cultures and religions within. And I thought, oh, what an incredible man, really.
Yeah, and so that diversity that the English mm-hmm. couldn't see, they just could not see how beautiful that town was, and how, I mean, it was just there were a lot of English tourists there at the time because everybody knew it was so beautiful, but the English, you know, certainly didn't respect it enough to save it in any way. And so when this book starts, when the English have gone in and absolutely, totally decimated the city, and that culture was just sort of laid flat as they went.
Yeah, it's tragic. It really is. I was hoping, Jocelyn, that you could read from us an excerpt from your book.
Sure.
And if you could just tell us why you've chosen this particular section to read.
Well, it's Begum. I'm just going to read a little bit from Begum Hazrat Mahal's point of view. And mm-hmm. it's after she has left the city of Lucknow because the English have gone in, and she had no choice but to escape. Because they were it was clear that they were out to kill her at first. And so she escaped with as many people as she could bring with her to the very northern border of India with Nepal. And it's a big jungle called the Terai. And that's where she wanted to set up camp and fight the English. She wanted to continue to fight them. And there's a man called Jailal Singh who was her right-hand man, and he he helped coordinate the army with her. So I chose it because I think it just gives I wanted to give a feeling of the landscape that they were in and who was there and what kind, the type of challenges the book tries to show that she went through after, again, the English Queen Victoria basically said that she had taken over the country. The Terai is a welcome haven, empty of Englishmen. Led by two men who know the jungle well, we've traveled north over hard rock, scrubby terrain, and around wide swamps filled with rushes and reeds. We are a long line of carriages, bullock carts, and flatbeds that make up the baggage train. We are thousands of soldiers, cooks, animal trainers, and attendants, gardeners, neighbors, calligraphers, accountants, vendors, villagers, birds in brass cages, tall white horses, light brown camels, and dark brown mules. Our soldiers rush into towns to offer handfuls of rupee coins and bring back sacks of lentils, fruits, and vegetables, and mustard oil for our lanterns. Our men flank our sides as we travel, resting in grasslands. We feel the strength of the dense green jungle ahead of us that makes up the foothills of the Himalayas, where we will set up our headquarters and plan our attacks. To no one do these majestic lands where the Terai begins mean more than to us. The English have a treaty, of course, that gives them control of the Terai. They want to profit from the timber, but they are also afraid of the marshy, mosquito-ridden land and the wildness of the dense jungle. The clear water in the river frees us from their menace and murder. Its soft gurgling removes the harsh sound of English voices. The water flows into our mouths and over our heads. It soothes us, rolls over us, and releases us. Terai, Terai, Terai. Chestnut-bellied nuthatches and large birds with paddle-shaped wings and white chins fly overhead. The Terai, where we can rest without fear of an Englishman's hunting cry. We've rushed forward through green grasslands, and deep inside all of us who live here, we rush back through the years. The reflection of ourselves as scorned people dissipates. A deeper sense of graciousness, a stronger sight in us throws us together in the Terai, makes us jovial again without our thinking about it. It's the proof of goodness and earthly righteousness that thousands of our citizens rest here together, sing, cook over small fires, and doze in the Terai's warm air beside a wide, clear river. We let down our guard, lie back in good faith. It is not long before I hear the news of Jailal. He was caught near Lucknow, Begum Hazrat Mahal, says the young soldier who suddenly arrives. While he was recruiting us, Begum. The young soldier is smiling. I smile too. It will be a good story of escape. He points to his throat. Raja Jailal Singh was hanged. I don't understand the smiling young soldier. I search his eyes, watch his lips, wait for him to say something that will clarify his words. I prompt him. He was recruiting on the outskirts of Lucknow. He's on his way here. The soldier stands at attention. Yes, he was, Begum. I stare at him. The young man is resolute. Someone else, I say. The soldier turns from me, lowers his head, and I see that it's only the sun that makes him squint and smile. No, Begum, not someone else. Perspiration breaks out on the back of my neck. Must be. Jailal wouldn't take chances. Jailal's adept. He knows the military techniques of English generals better than anyone else. This young soldier is provocative, sent here to tell us nonsense, some sort of ruse. I search his face. Jailal would not take chances. You see, Begum, says the soldier, as if he's reading my mind. They are excellent hunters. The English are moving steadily into the countryside, looking for fighters like Raja Jailal Singh. His terrible news slowly sinks in. We stand there, the soldier and I. He takes in all the people on the grasslands around us. Picnics are set up. People are enjoying the peace. Please don't say anything, I say. I don't know what we are going to do, but we must plan for our people first. Don't tell anyone yet. Go and find yourself something to eat. I look at Jailal's army. All the faces of the people he knew so well, the bodies he trained for our force, the starlit eyes who shared his jokes, the mouths that tasted his generosity, all these people who rest telling old stories. No one in a coat fastened with silver studs like Jailal. All of them wait for orders from the sure-footed man with a sharp, intelligent face. Nothing for the moment has changed, but in the next hours, all of us will know that Raja Jailal Singh is dead. Thank you.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much,
you.
Jill.
I just have one last question for you, Jocelyn. What are you working on now?
Oh, well, it's another historical novel. I love the history. I love the research. It's set in 1939 Arkansas in a little town called Eureka Springs. And yeah, it's in very early stages, but it's about an event that happened there in 1939. And I'm just trying to figure out the beginning, middle, and end of it right now.
That's exciting. Well, we'll certainly look forward to reading your next book when it comes out.
Oh, thank you, Crystal.
Thank you so much. What I will do is I will post links on the bottom of this so that you can go to Jocelyn's website, learn more about her, and also if you'd like to purchase a copy of her book, that link will also be there. And for everybody else, thank you for watching, and please subscribe.